So now our next presenter is Crystal Martin. So Crystal is a software developer and consultant at Slalom, a co-organizer of the Strange Loop conference, and a diversity in tech and business advocate. As a Detroit public school graduate, Crystal is passionate about equal access to education at all levels. She started her career in teaching in St. Louis, Missouri as a 2010 Teach for America Corps member and taught middle school math in St. Louis Public School. After a time in the classroom, she wanted to explore a career that would allow her to bring together her love for creativity, science, and community, and technology was just that. So this is Crystal with her talk titled JavaScript is AsynchroWAT. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Right. I'm super excited to be joining you all today. As mentioned, I'm Crystal Martin. I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan, and I currently work as a software developer at Slalom. It's a consulting firm. We're global, but I work out of the office in St. Louis. I like to say that I'm an angry Black woman, and I'm a proud cat mom of 2. So let's get on with it. So the title of this talk is JavaScript is Async or What? So I want to start with a little bit of a story. So once upon a time, oops, let's see. Oh goodness, sorry about that. Once upon a time, there was a junior developer that was given the task of integrating Stripe payments with Salesforce using JavaScript and Salesforce's Java-based proprietary language, AJAX. So if you're familiar with Salesforce, that's what you use to write backend code. And so some of the questions this junior dev asked were, what is an HTTP request? What is AJAX? Only time I had ever heard of AJAX was this. And so you can imagine none of this stuff made sense to me. I was completely lost. I had no idea what was going on. This is one of my favorite Slack emojis, party parrot, and this is confused parrot here. And I use this emoji a lot to talk to the more senior people on my team just to give me help. So I felt like I really resonated with the way this parrot looks, very, very confused. And so to tell you, I was writing code for this proprietary framework on Salesforce called Lightning. And it's based on the Aura framework, and it uses these AJAX requests to make server calls. And so a lot of things were kind of taken care of under the hood. And so like any other junior developer, once I got the hang of it, pretty much just followed the patterns, and that's just what I did. I had no idea really what was happening. I knew that, the JavaScript controller had to call some helper functions to somehow cause a server, but then gets data, but I just had no idea how this was working. And I kept, my code wasn't working. And I kept saying to myself, my logic is correct. My logic is correct. The logic that I'm using to process that response coming back from that server, from the call out, was right. But there was a fundamental misunderstanding that I was having. And what it was is that I was trying to act on data that had not come back yet. I was assuming that things happened in order. And to kind of illustrate this, my code kind of looks like this. So if you see here, I instantiate this action, I set the callback for it, and then I call it. Well, if you're a software developer, you know that the things are going to happen in that action.set callback function block. But I was writing the code to process that response after all of that. And so I was looking at my code and I was saying, why doesn't this work? And my coworker was like, it doesn't work that way. And I'm like, what? What is this? And he goes, because JavaScript is asynchronous. And what does that mean? I had no idea what that meant. JavaScript is async for what? What do you mean? I knew what asynchronous meant, and I knew what synchronous meant as words, but I had no idea what it actually meant when it came to programming. And let me just stop here. I know JavaScript, giant air quotes, I know that JavaScript is not an asynchronous language, but it has behavior, but just roll with it. Because I think people kind of just say this in general. But you see, I really feel like the problem here was how I learned. So I'm a self-taught developer. I did not go to school for CS. I got a nutrition degree. And a lot of times how you learn online is they teach you JavaScript kind of like any other language, right? It runs line by line, one thing at a time. And we get taught to solve these like puzzles rather than actually solving like real problems that this thing is intended to be used in. And so, sure, I know what if-else's are, I know what for loops are, but I didn't really know why JavaScript was the way that it is. And starting out, it's just not very apparent to a junior developer. We don't actually know, all the time what asynchronousness means in this context until we're dumped into a coding job and we have to write JavaScript for the web. And now I'm asking myself, like, where are all the for loops and cattle that I have to count from these random tutorials that I did? And so you're probably thinking, like, why is she talking about all this, right? Like, why is she saying all these things? But I want this talk to do two things. I want it to be something that can be helpful to new devs, to actually help you understand a JavaScript concept better, or just to if you've been doing it for a while, to reinforce that understanding, and just to kind of give you an overview on the different ways that asynchronous programming can happen in JavaScript. Because I wanted to break this down because it was hard for me to understand. So when I wrote this talk, I had no idea really how to explain this stuff, and that was the idea, that I would write it so that I could explain it to someone else. And then two is I want mid-career and senior developers in the room here to remember when things were just really confusing, and to take the time to stop and think about those junior people on your team, and just a way to break down concepts in a way that they can understand. So just kind of reconnect to that beginner's mind. And so I'm hoping that this talk will help you give a little bit more intuition on how to help somebody do that. So let's get into it. But before we can talk about what asynchronous means, let's talk about what synchronous means. And so essentially this means things happen in order, right? One after the other, step by step. And sometimes you have to call out to an external system or database to request for information to show it to a user. And it could hold up processing of other actions if they're dependent on that data. Or sorry, you can hold up other actions that are independent of that data. And if you were to wait and wait before you could go on to the next step for that data to come back, you're wasting precious resources that could be used to do something else. It's kind of like doing household chores. So say you need to clean up your house and do laundry. I don't know about you, but usually I put a load of clothes in first before I start cleaning to get that process going. Don't know about you. But if we were doing these chores in a totally synchronous way, this would require us to put our dirty clothes in the washer, then proceed to stand there for 30 minutes as they wash, rinse, and spin before we can put them in the dryer for the next part of the process. 2 hours later, you're still standing there, and in the meantime, you can't get anything else done, right? I can't move on to the bathroom and clean that or load the dishwasher. So that leads us to a conversation on asynchronous processes. So it means things are happening at different times, not in sync. And it would be much smarter for us to clean our house in a more asynchronous manner, right? Put a load of clothes in, go clean the kitchen, come back when the clothes are done, put them in the dryer, then go back up to the kitchen. And the same is true for code. Processing the rest of the code does not have to stop if there's a process that requires time. We just go on doing our own thing and then come back when there's an indication that that's done, and we can go on with the rest of what the next step is related to that asynchronous process. So again, you have to wait. You have to wait for your clothes to dry before you fold them and put them away, unless you're really weird, right? But you don't need to stand there and wait for them to get things done, to get other things done. And why do we use JavaScript for this? Well, JavaScript was written to deal with user interactions in real time in the browser. So users don't use the web in a synchronous way. You're interacting over a network, pulling information from external systems to show it or to interact with it, and that takes time, right? And so this was built to ensure seamless experiences for users on the web. So let's continue our conversation about asynchronous programming with JavaScript with a fun example that will help you learn something new about, presumably, 2 things: JavaScript and the natural hair care process. Because, Black women matter. So natchez have this little thing we like to call wash day. And this is something you go through when you go natural. It's this day-long process, oftentimes, of lovingly caring for your coily, kinky, curly strands. And this meme is obviously a joke, but it's not far from the truth when it comes to this process. It's a lot. And so generally, I do this when I have some time on a weekend day, where I also have some other chores to do, so I can kind of disperse it in there. And so here is what my natural hair process generally looks like. I have multiple processes within this function here. Again, this is kind of pseudocode, so just kind of roll with it. So when I'm doing my hair, I have a pre-poo treatment, which is pre-shampoo treatment, where I like condition it and make sure that I can comb it out to kind of soften my hair before I do the next step, which is detangling. Then I shampoo my hair, deep condition, rinse it out, air dry, and then I style it. And so if I were to do this synchronously in order, I would take all day getting this done, trying to do chores and hair if I got stopped at the do hair function. So you see here, synchronously, I would have to literally do hair and not like wait for that to be done before I can do laundry, clean litter boxes, et cetera, et cetera. So let's go into detail here. My pre-poo treatment requires me to put conditioner and oil in my hair and let it sit before I go on to detangle, right? So it requires me to wait. So that's an asynchronous process. And then I have another asynchronous process where I have to do deep conditioning, which again requires me to put conditioner in my hair and then wait again. And then I have another asynchronous process of air drying my hair, which takes even more time. And so looking at the do chores function, the first step is do hair, and then I have these 3 asynchronous processes in there. It would take forever before I got anything done or started on any other tasks. And so there's gotta be a better way for this, right? It's gotta be something we can do. And thanks to JavaScript, there is. We can do it asynchronously with callbacks. So very quickly, what is a callback? A callback is a function that is passed as an argument to an asynchronous function, i.e. a function takes a while to complete, to do something. And it's called once the asynchronous function completes. And so I have a little illustration here. Actually, this little kitten sitting next to me acted a fool at the vet last week. So this is actually a real scenario that I was in. But this is a callback function. So say if I take a scared cat to the vet, I'm going to have to comfort her upon her return. So this is the callback function. This is what will happen when the cat comes back from the vet. And so you see here, this asynchronous function, take cat to vet. I have to take her there. She gets these different things done to her, gets a temperature, cat shot, whatever, and then I bring her back home. And then the callback here is that comfort scared kitten that gets passed into there as a callback to the asynchronous function. And so after that, once the cat returns, I call comfort scared cat. Scared cat is no longer scared cat, she's happy kitty. And so going back to my hair process, we can use callbacks in this here. So to remind you, this is what it looks like. This is my first asynchronous process in here. This is the function that kicks off the do hair function. And so here's an example of pre-poo without a callback. So if I were to do this, I would have to wait 30 minutes again before anything else got done. And this would be considered a blocking operation. So that means not only can do hair not return, but I can't even go to the other functions within the other processes within the do chores function to do anything. So let's go ahead and rewrite this as a callback. That way we don't get stuck here. And so here I have pre-poo treatment rewritten as a function that takes a callback. And so let's look at this in some more detail. Here's the function declaration. And then I have that little process of doing, putting the conditioner in my hair. And then what I want to do is set a timeout here. So I have a set timeout function here that is going to wait 30 minutes, and then it's going to call that callback. And that function that also gets passed to the set timeout. And so now I'm not going to get blocked here. And I can call pre-poo treatment and keep it moving. And so passing in our callback function here, which is in this case that anonymous function that contains the rest of my process, I just abbreviated here for clarity's sake. You can see now I can just pass that in, and that asynchronous function handles that callback. So this looks good, but you know what? I have to add error handling. So sometimes my hair is just not ready to be detangled. I need to leave it in a little bit longer, because if I don't do that, I'll start yanking through my hair and I'll damage it, right? So I've added some error handling here. So if it's not ready, I'm gonna go ahead and throw that error. It's not soft enough yet to deal with, but if it's fine, I can go ahead and detangle and shampoo. But you know what? There's this other asynchronous process I need to add to this, because detangling and shampoo happen back to back, but then deep conditioning also takes a lot of time. So I need to let that sit too, as you can see demonstrated here. So I have another asynchronous function that takes a callback, right? And then air drying also takes time. So now I have a function that takes a callback, a function to take callbacks. And then this is what my do here function ends up looking like, right? So now partially this is great because I have this asynchronous behavior that allows me to continue on with other things while I get my chores done in an efficient fashion. However, this starts getting hard to read. What if someone else wanted to follow my process to learn how to take care of their natural hair? This could get really confusing. And this is what developers like to call callback hell. It's kind of confusing to figure out what's happening here, right? And if I needed, if I added more asynchronous process to this do hair function, it'll get out of control. And this is not an exaggeration. Literally, sometimes I have to apply color to my hair because I'm graying at 32. Who knew? Or I have to take a clarifying step before I do any of the things that I do. So this functionality is great, but the readability is not great. But there's a way that you can rewrite asynchronous code so that it looks more synchronous. It makes it easier to follow. And that is done by using promises. Oh, you mean like the promises of our law enforcement officers to make that made to serve and protect all American citizens, including Black citizens? Oh, no, just those JavaScript promises. Promises, so useful, yet so hard to understand, apparently in JavaScript and in real life. Anyway, what is a JavaScript promise? A JavaScript promise is an object, so it's just a JavaScript object that will produce a value at some point in the future. So promises basically make the promise that they'll let you know what happened, whether that promise was fulfilled, rejected, or it's pending. And the promise object has an internal state and result property and two method properties, as we'll talk about, resolve and reject. And promises also have these handler functions associated with them, then and .catch. And so I know that most of the times when you're dealing with promises, they're just frameworks that return promises. But I really found it really, really important to understand what's happening behind the scenes to understand the concept of a promise. And that just really helps with debugging and having a better understanding of JavaScript and its behavior overall. So this is we're gonna kind of jump into like the promise anatomy here. And so to kind of illustrate this, the promise objects constructor has a function that takes the resolve and reject methods as parameters. You can only pass one parameter to this promise constructor. And there's some executing code that will return some result. So we'll just use the pizza promise example. So there's going to be a promise that a baked pizza is returned from this promise, right? And so this is going to return something. So just imagine this is baked pizza is a method that has a set timeout, returns a baked pizza. And if it throws an error, the pizza's burnt, we're going to go ahead and reject with that error, right? But if it doesn't and the pizza is perfect, we're going to resolve this promise with the perfect pizza. And then at that point, I can call .then and act on this pizza. In this case, a perfect pizza, I'm going to eat it. It's going to be great. So that's the first function that, the first parameter you pass into .then is what happened, what you want to happen to that information if the promise returned resolved. And then the second parameter is what would happen if it failed. Conventionally, you generally will just use the .catch because that'll catch any error throughout those chain thens, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And so now we have prepoop rewritten as a function that returns that promise. And that is going to enable us to go ahead and put call the then handler multiple times on that result that gets passed into the next one. And so upon the completion of the first asynchronous function, it'll go on to the next step, return the promise, go on to the next step, so on and so forth. And so that's what our do here function looks like now. And so you see all these asynchronous functions in here. Those .thens come after a return of that. And this also means that we can handle all the errors in one place with that .catch at the bottom. And so now you can kind of see the side-by-side comparison from our callback to our promise construct. They're the same thing, right? But the one on the right is so much easier to read. There's no more pyramid of doom or callback hell. It just reads asynchronous code that looks kind of synchronous. But this can be improved even more with async await. And so AsynchroWAT is a newer feature in JavaScript, which I think most browsers support it now. I think it came out with ES8. So if you put the async keyword in front of a function, it automatically makes it into a function that returns a promise. And if the executing code does not return a promise value, it'll just wrap it in a promise. And then you can decorate with, or you can put the keyword await on your callback, essentially. So await makes sure the JavaScript waits until the promise is settled and then returns the result, and it only works with async decorated functions. So let's look at this. So now we have the same do here function written with async await. And so you see here, wherever you see await, that is another process in there that has that is asynchronous, right? So you have to wait for that response before going on to the next thing. And this is even easier to read. Go through the process, your hair is laid to the gods, you can go out in the town after you finish your chores, it's gonna be amazing. And now here you can see like a side-by-side comparison of all three approaches. Again, these are all correct ways of handling the same situation, but as you can see here, it gets progressively easier to see what's happening in the code. And so promises in async await are essentially syntactical sugar that JavaScript gave you to make writing asynchronous processes easier and more repeatable in your code base. And so, whoa, look at this. Now it looks so nice and easy to follow. And I feel like someone that didn't know JavaScript could probably guess what's happening here. And so now my do here function is rewritten with async await. It looks beautiful and asynchronous, lovely. Super excited. Party Parrot is no longer confused. And so now, not only have I efficiently finished my chores, but my hair is also done and I can go out and flaunt it because it was all done in a very organized, asynchronous way. It wasn't wasting any time. And look at you. Not only do you know how to slay natural hair now, but you can also explain asynchronous programming with JavaScript. Girl, what? Crazy. And you know who else who has some bomb hair? Breonna Taylor. Let me tell you, Miss Breonna Slade. You hear me? Look at her. Every single picture you see of her hair is done. So in closing, I just want to say, you know, being a junior developer is no joke, or being new to JavaScript is no joke. If you're having a hard time, it's okay. We're all learning every day and encountering things we don't understand or have answers for. And if you're a senior developer training a team of juniors, just remember and understand that this stuff it's just not always apparent, right? And try to remember where you were when you were learning this stuff for the first time. Because you know what they say, those who can teach, and those who can't just sit at a desk and code by themselves. And if you create tech training materials, just think about the people, think about who is gonna consume your materials, right? And think about all those diverse people that are gonna be looking at this and then make up technology as a field. And if you are an underestimated person in tech, we wanna hear from you. Start making content that reflects your own experiences and who you are. Originally, I was going to write this whole talk using laundry as my main example, but it just felt boring. It felt like it reminded me, I got flashbacks from those days, but it was just like stupid examples that didn't relate to me as a person. I got so irritated with it. And then a lot of times it made it hard for me to learn. And so I really, really thought this is just really important for people to create content that relates to you because somebody else is going to see themselves in that. It's important that everybody sees themselves in this field, no matter who you are. And I can tell you from experience and seeing other people do that, it makes a difference. And in closing, just with everything happening in our world, I really wrote this talk as a celebration of Black women. And I've been mentioning Breonna Taylor, a woman who was needlessly killed by people who swore to protect her. And if you're wondering what you can do, here are some ideas, and this is a list of things you can do to push for justice for her life and to honor it. And so this link actually here, the Sturdy Furry film, has literally every action item that people have been doing, from donating to her family, to signing petitions, to making calls and emails, to arrest these officers. If you are interested in that, here are some resources for you. I feel like I could not do this talk without mentioning what's happening in the Black community as a Black woman. And so I just want to speak my truth here, and I hope it resonates with you. And if it doesn't, send me an email, we can talk about it. So yeah, thank you so much. Black Lives Matter. And if you want to reach out to me, here I'm on Twitter as CoderMeow. I'm on Instagram as Christerical, and that's my website. It was great talking with you all.
Thank you so much, Crystal. I think we have all fallen in love with your personality and with the way you teach JavaScript, because to be honest, you even make me want to learn JavaScript. And
Yes.
I definitely didn't want to before this talk. So yeah, I am like the confused parrot, but not so much anymore. So love the analogies like everyone was saying. Yeah, it was just really great, really creative. Thank you so much also for taking a stance on Breonna Taylor, and Black lives really do like matter. And we here at Power to Fly stand in solidarity. And yeah, so thank you for those resources as well. Really important, because I know that a lot of us, we don't know where to go or who to talk to. So it's just really, really important. So thank you so much. Don't know if you have any last parting words, but that was probably the most fun presentation on JavaScript I've ever listened to in my life. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing is like speak your truth and do what you can. You know, like you can't solve all the world's problems. I'm taking a break right now to really focus on where I think I can have the most impact. It's okay to rest, but it's also not okay to rest forever. Like you got to do something, and that could be whatever you feel called to do. So I just really wanted to share that. And I'm sorry I did not leave a ton of time for questions. But
I think we were all in awe with your presentation, so it doesn't matter. I think everyone loved it.
Thank you. Well, yeah, like for folks listening, we can continue.
Yeah, Natalie is saying, yes, it was wonderful. I want to code. And you are the second person that has made me believe I can do it. So thank you.
Yes, Natalie.
Yeah,
but yeah, just contact me.
His name. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.